This episode of EMS One-Stop is brought to you by Lexapol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexapol.com. That's Lexipol.com.
Okay, just a second, Rob. Bear with me. Incoming missiles on Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, the whole central Israel now. It has been a crazy day. All right, yeah, we'll wait for the. We'll wait the minute and a half now to hear what the results are. I apologize if we'll have interference from my radio, but we're getting a live feed.
Well, I'm just going to talk while you wait then, because this is the start of our EMS One-Stop podcast. It's a little bit different to the podcasts that you normally hear us do, but if you're watching on YouTube, and I commend that you do, because we're looking at the moment live at our good friend and returning guest to the show, Dov Maisel. As you've heard, there's an incoming missile strike potentially. Actually, I suspect on Tel Aviv. Dov is just sitting here waiting by his radio to see what's going to happen in the outcome. And in a minute, we'll come back into the sort of normal recording and reintroduce Dov. Many of you know him. And we'll literally live this one through with him. And in a minute or two, we'll go back and we'll recount the dark days that have befallen the nation of Israel. And also, before we start, of course, we're talking about terrorist action. That's, I think, the key point. Of course, there are inevitably civilian casualties on both sides. This is the nature of war. But one of the most amazing things, and again, I'm talking about Dov, he's looking at me and he's listening to me, is that Hatzalah is a multi-denominational, multi-faith organization. It's not about those of the Jewish faith. It's actually Muslim, it's Jew, it's combined service here going on in Israel with Hatzalah. And I'm sure in a second when Dov comes back on, he will either confirm or correct what I just said. But I think that... Oh, he's back. There you are.
I'm back. We're waiting. But I'll just correct you on one thing.
Go on.
We are a multi-faith organization, but we are an organization of human beings. What we've underwent here in the past week has nothing to do with human beings. This is barbaric. This is something that I've never witnessed, and I've been through terror waves here in my 30 years of EMS. Yeah. I've seen buses blown up. I've seen suicide bombers in dozens. Nothing on this scale. This is something that is it's things that ISIS, we all remember watching the videos of what ISIS has done years ago. This overcomes all of that.
As your own president said, this is your 9/11. And when you start to think of it in those terms, I can't even begin to reiterate what you just said, but the gravity of what's just happened is the world is watching and the world is feeling for everybody there. Any news on the missile strike, Dov?
Yes, detonated by Iron Dome, and we're waiting to hear if there's any injuries. At the moment, nothing called in. Okay,
so this is a good time to restart. The last time I had Dov Maisel as my guest on, he also was under air raid warning. We had a very deep and wide-ranging discussion about, obviously, the attacks then, and also just some of the mass casualty incidents that Hatzalah has dealt with in the past. Before we talk about today, Dov, just give, for those that may not have heard our discussions before on this podcast and on this broadcast, just give us a quick sort of backstory, if you like, of Hatzalah itself.
So the United Hatzalah, for those of us who don't speak Hebrew so fluently, Hatzalah is rescue, the Hebrew word for rescue, or United Rescue of Israel. It's a community-based emergency medical service. Comprised of about 7,000 volunteers, doctors, paramedics, and EMTs that do first response on the community level. We operate throughout Israel, responding to approximately 2,000 emergencies on a regular daily basis. You know, your regular heart attacks, strokes, car accidents, whatnot. We operate over 1,000 motorcycles that the volunteers respond on. We operate as an ALS, BLS system. We have about 70 ambulances, both ALS and BLS units out there, ATVs. We operate with 2 helicopters today, and rescue boats and whatnot. You name it, anything that can assist and minimizing the response time to medical emergencies. We're there, we're out there, and creating real change and real impact in Israel. And amongst that, unfortunately, is also terror attacks, mass casualty incidents, and others.
So just to sort of conclude my question about Hatzalah itself, then, where do you get the staff and the volunteers from? Are they drawn from all walks of life, all sectors of the community?
So we call it United Hatzalah, United Rescue, because we unite the different walks of life, a cross-section of Israeli society, men, women, Jews, Arabs, Christians, all faiths, religious, secular, from all communities. Every city, every town, every village in Israel has volunteers, because these are people from the community that stepped up. We trained them, equipped them, given the technology and everything, and we operate. It's the Uber of life-saving here, and it's the auxiliary and buffer to the government ambulance services here.
Excellent. Thank you for telling us that. So let's go back just what must be a few days, many hours for you, because you have said you've not had a lot of sleep since then, but talk us through those opening hours.
So we're on day 10 of the war. And it's not an operation, it's a war. It's the war of light against darkness. The civilization against barbaric acts. Early last Saturday morning, 6:30 in the morning, I'm woken up to my radio going off on dozens of air raid sirens going off throughout the country. And under the auspices of this air raid, there was a ground strike of over 2,000 Hamas terrorists that crossed the border from Gaza into Israel, overtaking 22 towns, the southern border of Israel to Gaza. Of those, Sderot and other kibbutzim and villages, going in and creating massacres in these villages, going into houses, slaughtering families, children, babies, women, raping them, decapitating them, burning them, in all of these towns, killing, murdering 1,500 people. And to put things into perspective, if we look at, we call it the 9/11 of Israel. If we look per capita, it's like 40 times what happened in 9/11. Okay, just to put things into perspective. These are villages that some of them, 50% of the population were slaughtered and killed. Over 3,000 people were injured, and over 200 were taken captive back into Gaza, which is what opened up the operation of liberating these villages, and now an operation on Gaza to take Hamas out. This is, I have no words to describe the sights, what we needed to go through to treat people under fire, and I'm talking about hundreds. And just to put things into perspective, we're talking about, from the 1,500 people killed, we're talking about 1,100 civilians, women, children, babies, whole families that were simply slaughtered in their houses, burned, exploded, you name it. And this took hours until the IDF were able to take control. I'm talking about 36 hours until they were able to take control of these villages again and eliminate the terrorists from there. Over 2,000 terrorists were killed and accounted for, and others made it back into Gaza, with over 200 women, children, babies, and others that were taken captive under Hamas in Gaza. Now, I'll relate to a lot of what we in EMS experience, because we're talking about theoretically a civilian area. These towns, I'll just describe it, are really farms. It's like most of them do agriculture, growing produce, and are very peaceful. It's just farm roads. One of the most horrific parts of this attack was a massive peace party, a nature peace party there with over 3,000 people, partying at night, music, and one of these peace festivals, and over 50 terrorists overtook there, and more than 280 people were killed in that festival. And I think it was Bono from U2 that started one of his shows this past week, saying that at the break of dawn, the Stars of David were taken in this concert. And in this one site, there were more than 280 people killed, and hundreds injured. Some of them made it out, some of them did not. Now, as EMS, our response was obviously immediate, deploying volunteers out to the scene, not even understanding the magnitude of this incident, meaning one call after another coming in from people hiding in their homes, saying that there are terrorists, that some of their family members were shot, killed, some of them are injured, without the ability to even get to them. Very horrific phone calls, and this is before the stage of actually being able to get in there and treat the patients. And we're talking about dozens and dozens and hundreds of phone calls coming in from people hiding in closets, shelters, and describing the most despicable situation. And for our dispatchers, even for the dispatchers on the phone for long minutes and some of them even hours, this was the most horrific incident of their life. And the volunteers in the field responding, obviously, we always say safety, safety, safety first in EMS. But the situation here was that there were hundreds of people injured. And I've been through wars in my military service as a combat medic, as you, Rob, have experience in this in your past. You can imagine what a battlefield looks like. But this is a battlefield in the civilian arena on scales that I don't think have been known to humanity in the modern history. And the ability to treat patients, to see the devotion of volunteers, risking their lives, going in under terrorist fire, under crossfires between IDF soldiers and terrorists, pulling out victims. I would say that the amount of tourniquets that we put out in the first 36 hours was in the thousands of tourniquets. We treated over 3,000 victims on the ground, and the amount, the amount of tourniquets, bandages, chest seals, trachs, chest drains, needle applications, tubes that were put out in this first 36, 48 hours of operation is more than what we use, and I would say half a year. Unprecedented. We emptied out. We had trucks going from a logistical center that opened up, pushing equipment down to the southern region, of course, pushing out protective gear, bulletproof vests and helmets that our volunteers were using, because we actually, our ground rule is like in every MS, you don't enter a danger zone. But the volunteers getting on the radios with me, I was in HQ when it started before I headed actually down to the field, was they're calling and screaming for help from in there. The IDF soldiers that started the defense process were understaffed, and they had no capabilities to rescue the victims out from the scene. And our volunteers simply, I told them, it's up to you. Literally. It's up to you. And they all went in, and the government ambulance services, which were 2-3 kilometers back at a different junction out of the direct fire, we actually started transporting these victims out from the villages out to the hospitals, to the government ambulance service. Our helicopters, we immediately brought them both down south to that region, to the immediate region. And there were so many. Just try to wrap your thoughts around having 3, 4, 5, 10 gunshot wound patients thrown at you at 1 or 2 medics with 1 ambulance. You can't pile them up one on top of another. We had volunteers going with their private cars, throw them in the back seats, literally, with tourniquets on them. Imagine tourniquets on all extremities, needle in their chest, Asherman, chest seals, thrown in the back seats of cars, driven out 2-3 kilometers out to the ambulances that were waiting there that can treat them, and from there either to the helicopters or to the ambulances taken to the hospital. It's a sight that you can't even explain. We're from our experience here, and I'm sure Rob, you'll have questions. I'm just going on and on because
no, please, Dov.
Part of my venting, maybe.
Listen, mate. You're painting a picture here and I'm not going to disturb you because the picture you're painting is one that we all need to hear. So please do carry on.
And I'm talking about hundreds of medics, EMTs, and doctors that jumped out of their homes from all around the South and from other parts of the country and headed down there and ran in under fire. Ran in under fire because there were hundreds, actually thousands of people that were injured. Thousands. I think the total count up to now is about 3,500 people that were injured, beyond the 1,500 that were killed. So we're talking about 22 scenes with 5,000 casualties, okay, of them injured and killed. And I think it's I mean, even us with all of our experience through the suicide bombers here of 150 and 200 people injured and 15, 20, 30 killed, it was luxury when I look back at those, because then we'd have ambulance assembled at the scene within 5, 10, 15 minutes, and we were able to transport everybody to the hospital within less than an hour. This is an incident that went on for 48 hours. And from there into the military operation, once the villages, imagine, as you continue operating from the fields, from behind buildings in the cities, these terrorist groups that were hiding out started coming out, shooting. We had volunteers of ours that were shot while treating civilians on scene, shot. We had 7 volunteers shot. We had 2 volunteers killed, and we have 2 volunteers missing that were on standby in this festival. They were probably abducted and taken into Gaza, as more than the 200 people that were kidnapped into Gaza. And this is a situation that you can't even imagine. We're not talking about an hour. We're not talking about 2. We're talking about 48 hours of this. And after the 48 hours, for the past 8 days after that, is a military operation undergo in Gaza. And throughout the day, missiles showered on Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, southern cities, direct hits on houses. I live not far from Tel Aviv, and over the weekend, I had 2 missiles drop within 300 meters from my house that were not detonated by Iron Dome. They outran the Iron Dome because even the Iron Dome can't get all of them. And I'm talking about the house shaking. I'm talking about the kids panicking. And I'm talking about me needing to leave the house in order to respond. And this is happening throughout the country. We're talking about almost 10,000 missiles over this past 10 days in this operation. Add to that, and I'm sorry, Rob, that I'm continuing to go on.
No, keep going. Keep going.
Not only looking at the Gaza front, the Lebanese front, Hezbollah has been agitating on the border, and yesterday alone shot over 10 missiles and 9 anti-tank missiles towards civilians and military targets in Israel. This morning, the government ordered evacuation of 28 towns on the northern border. We're talking about almost 25,000 people evacuated from their homes, which is all the towns that are up to 2.5, 3 kilometers from the border. And we are on high alert there as well with our volunteers, over 1,500 volunteers spread out in these communities because they live there, and reinforced by volunteers from central Israel that are assisting there. We're looking at a multi-front war on the state of Israel, and us as a non-government organization, as a non-political organization, as an EMS that sees no religion, that sees no race. Like I said, we have volunteers from all groups. By the way, one of the volunteers that was killed was a Muslim from Nazareth, and he was buried just the other day. Another volunteer of ours, a doctor, Dr. Tarek from Ararat, Bedouin, Muslim from the south, stopped to treat patients, victims on the road from the terror attack, and he was taken by the terrorists hostage and used as a human shield for 2 hours straight while they were killing 26 different people driving down on the road. They ended up shooting him in the leg, and then they were taken out by special forces. These monsters see no religion. These monsters just want to kill. And unfortunately, within our family here of the volunteers, everyone is affected. No one is immune. And these are very, very tough days. Rob, we've spoken many times before, and we
have.
go back years, but nothing like this. And we're not done, and we're looking at weeks, maybe months ahead of what's going on here. And first of all, I would like the prayers of all our family of EMS around the world to see what we're doing, understand that we are all one in this. It's the war of good against evil, and our job here is to shine the light on all the good that's being done within this.
So thank you, Dov, for that. We all needed to hear that. And before we carry on, we're just going to take a quick break.
Lexipol empowers first responders and public servants to best meet the needs of their residents safely and responsibly. Serving more than 2 million public safety and government professionals in over 8,000 agencies and municipalities, Lexipol offers a range of solutions that includes policies, training, behavioral health resources, news and analysis, and grant assistance services for law enforcement, fire and rescue, EMS, local government, and other agencies dedicated to public safety. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com.
And we're back, and we're talking to Dov Maisel, who is in Israel right now. As you may have heard before the break, a very descriptive, a very powerful, a very emotion-filled description of what's gone on. You mentioned it. You said it, Dov, first. We've known each other for many, many years. Therefore, I've seen you for many, many years. You look tired. How much sleep have you had?
We've been in this for 10 days, and I know everyone will tell me you have to sleep because it affects your judgment. I agree. I try to get some sleep, but I would say I've accumulated maybe 12, 13, 15 hours of sleep in the past 10 days because it's war. It's simply war.
I'm not going to offer you any advice, mate. You've got to do what you got to do, of course. You have a lot of people on the ground. You've just discussed, the scenario, the scenes they're seeing. You've lost people potentially and sadly. How are you monitoring them? How are you deploying them? How are you keeping an eye on them? And all that kind of logistics stuff that you have to do.
So we have our whole system. Well, we got to understand first of all that even our we're a volunteer organization. So everything outside of HQ is basically structured on volunteers. The whole structure, the managerial structure of the whole organization outside of HQ is volunteers. HQ itself comprised of about 350 employees, logistics, operations, etc. Because of the war, so 360,000 Israeli reservists of the IDF were called into active duty now. So us as well in management, also all of our combat soldiers have all been drafted into the front lines of the operation. So we're short-staffed, but we have a structure that's built in operations. Every one of our volunteers is monitored based off of geolocation of their devices. Whenever they're on call, they're all in the system. We can see everyone. We're monitoring everyone, and we have sort of a roster and like a roll call on all shifts throughout the country every 8 hours, and throughout the shifts on every mission. We have extra monitoring of them, especially when going out into the danger zones, the missile strikes, the gunshot incidents. So we have double eyes on them, eyes in the sky, and making sure we have roll call at the end of every call. At the end of every shift, we have our psychotrauma unit, which we've spoken about before.
We have, right.
That does a debrief. We've debriefed over 1,800 volunteers since the beginning of this operation. And we've taken into additional treatment, some of them, especially from the first 48 hours that were exposed to the worst horrific sights. And because we understand, and we all in EMS are familiar with the high rate of suicides in the system and the emotional burden that this takes, especially when dealing with this. So we have super awareness when it comes to this. So we have also this at the end of every shift, and before every shift, a briefing to those in the area that are at high risk of missile strikes and terror attacks. It's an effort. It's a major effort, but we understand that this is what will keep us going for the duration of this mission, and we don't know how long it will be. Like I said, it may be weeks, maybe months.
There is inevitably going to be dark before the light, Dov. I think we've all realised that, and there's still a lot to do. You mentioned the equipment supplies that you've used already. Obviously, you need more. Is there any? What can we give you? What can we send you? What can we do to help?
So we have an organization, and I'll send you the link afterwards, Rob, to our campaign. We actually just did yesterday or the day before. I lost track of time already, but an order of $50 million of additional medical equipment, as all our reserves were drained out in this past 10 days. And looking forward, we're in imminent need of all equipment related to trauma, command and control, mobile clinics. We understand that localized treatment will be needed, especially looking at what happened after the first 36 hours of all of our hospitals. Just to put things into perspective, again, I mentioned this before, Israel is not big. Israel is about the size of New Jersey, with a population of New Jersey, which is about 10 million people, and we only have 22 hospitals here in the whole country. And when we had 3,000 injured people transported to the hospitals, immediately we had an influx of the hospitals. So we understand that we're looking forward, if this develops as something on a larger scale, we'll be needing to operate with this sort of like field hospitals, clinics, to do triage of what actually needs to get to a hospital and what can be treated. So we're now working on creating and expanding our field hospital unit triage tents with equipment that we're going to be using there. We're talking about monitors. We're talking about mobile command centers, etc., because we're looking at regional operation. If significant infrastructures are taken out, I'm talking about electricity, I'm talking about communications, data, cellular towers, etc., which are on target of our enemy here. So we are doing a lot now to expand our capabilities for looking forward into communications and overseeing the whole big picture.
So we'll publish that link in the show notes, first of all. And, if you send a distinct list of other equipment, I'm sure we can pass that around and obviously do what we need to do. In the last 12 months, we've certainly been looking, for example, at ambulances for Ukraine. So we were focusing on that. Obviously, the focus. I know.
Us too. It's a bit ironic that until just a few months ago, we ourselves.
Of course, yes.
More than 10 ambulances in Ukraine. We purchased and put ambulances in Ukraine, and we're operating there. We did a massive humanitarian effort there of bringing in some medical supplies, more than 150 tons of medical supplies into Ukraine, and now we're on this end. So
indeed. And actually, while we're talking about other good deeds that Hatzalah has done, and one of the reasons I was hoping to talk to you a few weeks ago, as you returned from the mission to Morocco and to Marrakesh, and of course the great connector here is that my home team at Prodigy were able to send Rashid over to work with you guys. Of course, he is
Rashid was a major asset on the ground there. It was tremendous. This is what the beautiful thing about our family of EMS.
Exactly.
Connections, as you sent an email, and he was boots on ground with us, and it was amazing. We treated hundreds of people in Morocco in these field clinics in the towns that were devastated by the earthquake, and we're a small family in the world, a very special family that sheds a lot of light, I gotta say.
We are indeed, and I certainly, and I know you do, I look at it that way, that we are a global village of medical providers. And for the Marrakesh operation, of course, we were delighted to send you Rashid, but the focus is very, very firmly back on you. And Dov, this is the classic question I ask at the end of every interview, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you, or anything you need to tell us and to tell the entire global EMS system?
Wow. I think that we all, for so many years, train and treat patients, and we always think we end up knowing it all, that we've seen it all and done it all. And unfortunately, reality beats Hollywood, 10 times over. And unfortunately, there's evil in this world that always shows us that it can get so much worse. And the unfortunate sights that we need to see and deal with, knowing that this community has our back means a lot. We have over 7,000 volunteers here. Well, a little less, 700 were drafted, but 6,500 volunteers here that are full of spirit and professional, and taking everything that they've learned and knowing that this community is backing them and giving us what we need in order to do our job on the ground means a lot. It really does mean a lot, and it's not a cliche. Knowing that everybody's behind us, knowing that good will beat evil, and not be misled by any social media and BS. Pardon my directness, and fake news that they're trying to show about what's going on here. I can say firsthand, I've seen it. I've been there. I saw it. It is all true, and it is 100 times worse. 100 times worse than what is actually shown. And as professionals, you always know they don't show on TV or on social media what you guys actually see out there in the field. And I'm telling you, it's 100 times. It's the face of pure evil. Face of pure evil. And our job in this world of EMS is to do the good and show the good, and good will win, and we will prevail.
Dov, I'm going to leave it there. Those were very, very strong words. As I said, I'm going to make sure that the world's EMS system sees this, hears this message, and understands what you're going through. From one brother to another, look after yourself, and I know in turn you will look after your team. And Dov Maisel, in the heat, in the thick of it, the light that is over the dark. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob, for the opportunity.
So I'm just going to close off before I let Dov go. I want to thank Dov and the team of United Hatzalah for literally taking time. I'm recording in the morning here on the west coast of the US. It's actually nearly 9 p.m. at night in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, in the West Bank, in Gaza, everywhere over there. And so thank you so much for taking time with me. Don't forget, you can listen to this on Apple Podcasts. You can also watch, and I commend it, if you're listening, just get onto YouTube and watch this, because you need to see the emotion in Dov's face. And please do that. So please make sure that you continue to follow EMS One-Stop. Thank you to my guest, Dov Maisel. I've been Rob Lawrence. This has been a very special edition, to me anyway, of EMS One-Stop. See you next time.